behaviors shape what this ecosystem looks like to us. Each animal kind of has a job. You might notice up here in the trees, they're all pretty uniform in shape. All the trees are pruned back to about giraffe height. That is because a giraffe spends about 80% of its day just eating, living the dream. But it is actually beneficial that they prune back the trees. It helps the sunlight filter in. It makes the underbrush grow in nice and thick. That's going to provide food for some of these other creatures, these hoofstock that are kind of the lawnmowers out on the savannah. Now those little animals we're seeing over there are called springbok. Pretty appropriate name for them because they kind of spring across the savannah in a behavior called pronking. They'll jump up in the air and straighten their legs out. That's going to help them move about 13 feet forward and 6 feet straight up in the air, so they can run and move around very quickly. They'll move at about 60 miles an hour. So those little tiny antelope are the third fastest land animal in the entire world. Pretty impressive. Now that speed is really important. They need to be able to keep up with their herd if it begins to migrate. And it's also going to help them escape any predators as well. Now it looks like we're coming up on another type of hoofstock over here on the left. This is a species called Ankole cattle. These massive horns that are really impressive. They do look like they would be quite heavy, but they are hollow on the inside. So those horns are surprisingly lightweight. They are a pretty critical component of their anatomy. Those horns are how they stay cool, which is kind of weird, but kind of cool at the same time. There are a lot of blood vessels flowing throughout those horns, so during the day, heat will dissipate off of the surface, and then that cooler blood cycles back into their bodies and lowers their core temperature. So they have a nice built-in air conditioning system. How cool is that? And those animals are actually the only domestic animals on the reserve. However, they are never used for food or for labor. They are simply a status symbol. They're kind of a way to show off how much wealth you have. If you have Ankole cattle out on your property, it's kind of saying, well, I have enough money to feed my family, all of my working animals, and still have more than enough left over for these animals that don't actually do any work for me. Not like having a Ferrari parking it in the driveway without actually ever driving it. Now here on the right, there are some white-bearded wildebeest. This is a pretty small herd of them. They do usually have a much larger herd. In fact, they have the largest migration of any land animal, so when those animals do start to migrate, there will be about 1.2 million of them moving across Africa all at once. Now that migration is so large that it can be seen from space. Pretty crazy. Over there on the right-hand side, there are 2 giraffes.
Yes, she said you can do that, but they can't stand up.
Now, since they are eating all day long, they are well equipped for it. Their tongue, when fully extended, is about as long as your arm is. That's crazy. That's a long tongue. But their tongues are also purple, which is super cool. It's thought to be because that tongue spends so much time outside of their bodies every day that the dark color prevents any UV damage. It's their built-in purple tongue sunscreen. A huge tower of giraffes over here on the left, including a baby giraffe. We're doing good on the babies today. Now that one is probably 1 or 2 months old based on its size, as it's pretty small. Although small is kind of a relative term for a giraffe. They're still about 6 feet tall when they're born. Now those are called Maasai giraffes. You can see how dark their coat pattern is, and each one of their spots is kind of bumpy on the outsides. It's not very cleanly defined. That tells me that those are Maasai giraffes. Now there are 9 different subspecies of giraffes, but technically only 1 species. These different subspecies are divided up by that geographic range and based on their different coat patterns. Over on the left, it looks like there is a troop of monkeys. Those are called mandrills. They are the largest species of monkey in the world, actually. Now, the reason they are monkeys is because they have tails. Even though they are very small, that still classifies them as a monkey. Something like a gorilla or an orangutan that would be much larger than that animal is not actually a monkey because they do not have tails. That's the difference. Monkeys have tails, apes do not. Now, over on the right-hand side, there is a beautiful African elephant. Some incredible adaptations on that animal as well. You can see how its ears are just full of blood vessels. So, they'll flap them back and forth, and the heat will dissipate off the surface, once again, keeping them very cool. You might notice thermal regulation is very important to animals living here in Africa. Also getting a fabulous view of how that animal uses its trunk. It's very diverse in its uses. It can be used as a snorkel, it can spray water into their mouths, they can pull over something as heavy as a tree, yet pick up something as small as a coin. Incredible creatures. Now, a lot of the animals out here in the savannah, unfortunately, they face habitat loss due to the mining of a material called coltan. That's a metallic ore that is used in all of our cell phones, most of our electronics. So when you do need an upgrade, you want to get rid of that old item, you take a little bit of extra effort to recycle it. It's going to make sure that the amount of money happening in this ecosystem actually increases. We're not going to make it! We're going to make it! Everybody lean over to the right. Lean over to the right. Oh my goodness, okay, we made it. Oh boy, Hakuna Matata, right? No worries. We all good back there? All good? Okay, like 6 of you are good. I'll take the rest of your silence as a yes, question mark. Okay. Okay, now if you look over on the left and the right hand side, those markings are another great indicator that that elephant probably came through this area. Those are all tusk marks. Since elephants only eat plants, they're completely herbivorous, it doesn't provide quite enough of the minerals and nutrients that they need, so they'll find red clay pits like that, dig it out with their tusks in, and then just eat it to supplement their diet. Really cool behavior. It really shows how resourceful those animals are. Now here on the reserve, we have been able to do some pretty incredible research on elephants, and we have discovered that elephants don't like bees, like the insect, which seems like the most random piece of information to know, but it has come in handy. Farmers in Kenya have started to use beehives as a way of keeping elephants out of their crop fields. It's kind of like a biological fence. Of course, that protects those crops from being trampled by elephants or eaten by them, but that in turn is what protects those elephants. It eliminates the conflict between the human and the animal, which is one of the major focuses of these projects that are funded by the Disney Conservation Fund. Now, it does look like over here on the left we have stumbled across a flamboyance of greater flamingos. These are the tallest standing flamingos of all the 6 species, and they are also the lightest pink. Now, what little color pink they do have does actually come from their diet. You can see many of them are feeding right now. They're skimming their beaks across the surface of the water to collect things like blue-green algae and brine shrimp. Brine shrimp contains a protein called beta-carotene that accumulates to give them that beautiful pink color. Since those animals do get their food from the waterways, it is important that us humans do our part to make sure that water is nice and clean for them. One of the best ways to do that is just by reducing your plastic intake. Figure out what small things you are doing each and every day that you can kind of improve and use something that's reusable instead of using that single-use plastic, whether that's something like skipping the straw or bringing a reusable bag to the grocery store, getting a new reusable water bottle. Any of those small things you do at home will prevent waste from ending up in our waterways and help protect not only flamingos, but millions of other animals living in our waterways and oceans as well. Oh, now it looks like over on the left there are 2 cheetahs. You can see them roaming around back there. Daytime is really the best time to see cheetahs. They are very unique for big cats in that they are daytime predators. That is why they have those dark stripes running down their face. It prevents too much sunlight from being reflected into their eyes and helps them see a little bit better as they are hunting during the day. Now they are also unique for big cats in that they do not have retractable claws. Their claws stay out all the time to help them grip the ground as they are running at speeds of about 65 miles an hour or so. Pretty different from the animals we're about to see over on the left. It looks like there may be a pride of lions up here on the left-hand side. There's one up towards the front of the truck there, resting. Not unusual to see a lion just lying around. They are nocturnal predators, so during the daytime they sleep between 16 and 20 hours. Now, we don't like to say they're lazy, they're just very good at conserving their energy, which is the exact same excuse that I use. Now, when they do come out to hunt, it will not be the male that does the hunting. It is going to be those two female lionettes. The males are going to stay behind to protect the pride and the cubs. Now, the reason they hunt at nighttime is just because they are well equipped for it. Their eyesight is about 6 times better than a human's at night. Now, nice and close to us, there are 2 of the world's bravest bontebok.
Yeah.
Really cool animals. Now, in the early 1900s, those animals were hunted so much that there were only 17 individuals left on the planet. Kind of crazy. Now, it is thanks to a lot of that human involvement that we're even able to see that animal here today. We're able to kind of very strategically breed them and get their numbers back up into the thousands. So that's why supporting reserves like this one and this conservation efforts is so important. We want to make sure those animals are around for generations to come. Up there in the bushes called water buck. They have heart-shaped noses, and they're called water buck just because they do have a much heavier reliance on water than most of the other species living on the savanna. You never find them straying too far from any water sources. And once again, they are well adapted for their environment since they spend a lot of time physically in the water. They have a very oily coat, so when they do get out of the water, they'll be able to dry off nice and quickly. Have found quite a few different animals out here on the savanna. We're going to head on over into the Magadi Glen, which is just a little bit of a different ecosystem, and see what we can find. Now, it does look like over on the right-hand side there are 2 yellow-billed storks. Now, those birds are really cool because they are completely carnivorous. So right now they are actually hunting. They're going to hold their beaks open in the water a little bit, and anything that wiggles through it will be snapped up basically instantly. So they will eat anything as long as it's wiggly enough. Insects, fish, amphibians, reptiles, mammals. And they would even eat other birds given the opportunity. So we will leave them to their hunting. A lot of the animals that we have seen out here on the reserve are unfortunately endangered species, not a ton of them left out in the wild. But that is why supporting reserves like this one and the conservation efforts that originate on these reserves is so important. One of the really easy ways you can do that is by making a contribution to the Disney Conservation Fund at any of the merchandise locations in the park. Now, we do match dollar for dollar every single donation received and cover the administrative fees as well. Make sure that 200% of that donation ends up where it needs to go. Now, there are over 170 countries in which the Disney Conservation Fund hosts these conservation efforts. They can range from anything from rehabilitation and reintroduction to the wild, to something like the Elephants and the Bees project, all the way over to anything that kind of changes human behavior here. Make sure that the people living near these animals have the resources, the education they need to live in a way that does not cause any harm to the animals around them. And people like us can do that exact same thing right